So, what was Vegas before it was Vegas? Well, it began as a promise that did not quite match the land that sat beneath it. On May 15th of 1905, a patch of desert beside a railroad line was carved into parcels and sold to the hopeful, the ambitious, and the slightly desperate. It had to be. There was nothing else to it. There was nothing there. The name Las Vegas suggested meadows, maybe something soft and green, but the reality was that this was a harsh basin where water dictated survival and shade was a luxury, usually only afforded to the small, like lizards and rabbits. The air itself could feel like resistance. Buyers stood in the heat and listened to the language of opportunity, and for a moment it all sounded convincing. There was land, growth, a fortune. Yet long before the auctioneer's voice carried across the dust, people had already lived there. They already understood it, and they respected it in ways that these newcomers didn't and couldn't. The Southern Paiute had moved there in that valley for many generations. They guided their lives by the knowledge rather than by speculation. When the land was sold, it wasn't empty, it was just being renamed. The railroad was the real author of this moment. Trains did not just connect places, they created places. A stop along a railroad line could become a town pretty much overnight, and that was exactly the gamble that was unfolding in 1905. Investors didn't need the land to be easy, they only needed it to be useful. Water from natural springs made the area a rare and valuable pause in a long, dry journey along the train. And once the place becomes a necessary stop, it begins to grow, whether it's ready or not. What followed was not an organic rise from the dirt and the sands, but a calculated one. Streets were mapped, lots were sold, and the idea of Las Vegas began to take shape before the city itself fully existed. It was a place imagined to into being and then forced to catch up with its own reputation, which started out as not a great one. But the deeper story does not begin with the buyers and blueprints. It begins with loss that rarely makes it into the polished version of events. As settlers and spectators moved in, the Southern Paiute were pushed further out. Disease and violence and displacement reduced the communities that had once navigated this land with their quiet expertise. By the time Las Vegas was formalized as a city in 1911, the people who had known the valley best were confined to a fraction of it. Decades later, only a small number remained on land just north of downtown in an area known as the Colony. When people talk about founding a city, they often focus on what was built. They rarely pause and consider what had to be removed in order to build it. With growth came this burst, not steady waves. In one of the most powerful surges arrived the Hoover Dam. In the early 1930s, Las Vegas was still a small desert town, but the dam project did bring workers and families in a sense of purpose that kind of reshaped everything. The Great Depression was crushing much of the country right then. But yet, here was this place where jobs existed, where something enormous was being built. Hotels were being filled, streets grew busier. This was a burgeoning hope for people who had none. This town that had once depended on passing trains was starting to become a destination. Yet, even in this moment of expansion, the cost was written in quieter stories. Men worked in dangerous conditions. Heat, water, and machinery, of course, took their toll, as they always do. The dam gave Las Vegas a future, but it demanded a price that was not always acknowledged. There were a lot of people who died building the dam. You should look into the history of that sometime, and maybe I will. But then there's a story that rarely appears in the neon glow of nostalgia. The first man to die in connection with the Hoover Dam project was John Gregory Tierney. He was killed in a flash flood in 1921. Years later, his son Patrick Tierney returned to the same region in search of work during the Great Depression. On December 20th, 1935, he fell from an intake tower and died. He became the last recorded fatality of the project. Same date, same place. A father and son connected by a single structure that would help build a city's future. It's the kind of detail that sounds almost fictional, yet it's entirely real. Las Vegas grew stronger as the dam rose, but for one family, that growth closed a circle in the most tragic way possible. Imagine what that family must have been feeling and going through. It happened again. By the time that gambling was legalized in 1931, Las Vegas had discovered something about itself. It did not need to be comfortable or traditional. It needed to be appealing in a different way. So gambling offered exactly that. It turned risk into entertainment and uncertainty into attraction. Workers spent their entire paychecks. Visitors arrived out of curiosity and stayed for the possibility of winning. Just the possibility was the draw. The city leaned into this identity very quickly. It became a place where rules were looser, where time felt slightly detached from consequence. Divorce laws were shortened to 6 weeks, drawing many people who wanted to begin or end something quietly. Marriages could happen just as fast, and to this day, a lot of people flock to Las Vegas to get married. I did once. It was a mistake. Las Vegas was not just offering experiences. It was offering shortcuts through life's usual constraints that are there for a good reason in most cases. The popular narrative often places organized crime at the center of Las Vegas's rise. But that story is only part of the truth. Casinos existed before Bugsy Siegel arrived. The infrastructure was already forming. What figures like Bugsy Siegel contributed was myth. When he was murdered in 1947, the story traveled far beyond Nevada. It added stories of danger and intrigue and a sense that Las Vegas was not just a place to visit, but a place where anything might happen. People are drawn to misery. They're drawn to risk. The city didn't invite those impulses. It didn't invent these impulses, but it learned how to package them neatly with a bow on top. And once that packaging was in place, the reputation took on a life of its own. Yet beneath that growing frame was a contradiction that's difficult to ignore. For years, Las Vegas was segregated. There were Black entertainers that could perform in the most glamorous of venues. They were drawing crowds and generating profits, of course, like Lena Horne. But these people were not allowed to stay in the hotels where they worked. They were expected to entertain without belonging. The Moulin Rouge Hotel, which opened in 1955, became the first racially integrated casino in the city. But its existence was brief. Change did not come quickly, and when it did, it often was driven by pressure and image and economics rather than by principle. A lot of things are driven by economics. It's a reminder that even in a city built on illusion, some realities were stark and unavoidable. But then came one of the strangest chapters in the city's history, a period when danger itself became a form of entertainment. In the 1950s, nuke testing took place at the Nevada test site, not far from Las Vegas. The blasts could be seen from the city. Hotels advertised the best vantage points. Imagine. Visitors would plan trips around these testing schedules. Some even packaged meals and watched the explosions as though they were all just part of the Vegas show. The city earned the nickname the Atomic City, and for a while, that label was embraced rather than questioned. It's difficult to imagine now the idea that something so destructive could be treated as just a spectacle within visual range, but that is exactly what happened. Las Vegas had found yet another way to turn risk into reward. As the decades passed, the city continued to evolve, layering new identities over old ones. Lavish resorts, world-class entertainment, a massive tourism, all of these things transformed into a global destination. Millions of people arrived each year. They were drawn by the promise of escaping their ordinary lives. Yet even as the skyline grew brighter, the underlying patterns remained. Las Vegas was still a place built on extremes. Wealth and loss existed side by side. Celebration and despair often occupied the exact same space. Studies would later show higher rates of taking one's own life compared to many other cities, which is a sobering contrast to the image of endless enjoyment. The same environment that encouraged indulgence could also amplify extreme isolation and loneliness. There are other stories that don't appear in travel brochures, too. Human trafficking has been a persistent issue, with vulnerable individuals often drawn to the city in search of opportunity, only to encounter exploitation. For people who know me personally, they know that I am a survivor of human trafficking. Part of my human trafficking story does take place in Vegas. I don't talk about it very often. It's one of the darkest chapters of my life. There was a time where I was spending a lot of time talking about it, but I've taken a step back from that now. But the very factors that make Las Vegas this appealing, it offers anonymity and constant movement and a culture of excess where there's lots of people with lots of money. But these can also create conditions where harm is a whole lot easier to hide. It's really an uncomfortable truth, but it's part of the city's reality, and most cities' realities these days, but especially in Las Vegas. Every place that promises escape must also confront what people are trying to escape from. And still people continue to come. They arrive for weddings, for celebrations, for a few days away from their routine. They walk the strip, they take in the lights, they step into a version of the city carefully designed to feel separate from everything else. That's the enduring power of Las Vegas. It does not ask people to forget reality entirely. It simply invites them to set it aside for a little while, like a trinket on a shelf. They can go pick it up again later. The desert remains what it always has. It's dry and demanding and unforgiving. The difference is now that it's covered in neon and possibility and even air conditioning. So when you think about the founding of Las Vegas on May 15th of 1905, it's worth looking beyond the simple image of an auction in the desert. It's worth considering the layers that followed and everything that came before. The risk that builds its growth, the contradictions that shaped its identity. Las Vegas did not become what it is by accident. It became what it is by understanding something very specific about human nature and the way the human brain works. People will always chase opportunity. They will always be drawn to risk. And if you can create a place that offers both, even in the middle of the desert, they will come. So here's the question I want to leave you with today. When a city is built on escape, what does it reveal about the things that people are most eager to leave behind? And as always, if you enjoy stories like this, please make sure you follow the History Happens Facebook page for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments, and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Every subscriber helps. And in future episodes, I hope to start reading some of the comments that you guys leave in some of the videos. I think that would be fun. Thank you for watching.